You hear me? I have been standing in this line for 40 minutes, and then you just breeze past the counter like you own the place. I have bills to pay, I got meetings, and nobody back there would even look at me. Now you think a badge lets you cut in front of everybody?
Sir, I'm conducting a federal investigation.
A simple banking transaction, a valid ID, and one word that made an entire room go silent. When Dr. Alana Mitchell walked into First Union Bank that Tuesday morning, she had no idea her professional credentials, her dignity, and her very identity were about to be thrown across a counter like trash. What started as routine business became a viral moment that exposed something ugly festering beneath the surface of everyday America. But here's what nobody expected. When the teller refused to believe she was who she said she was, when the manager doubled down on the humiliation, Dr. Mitchell didn't raise her voice. She didn't storm out. Instead, she said 4 words that turned every face in that bank pale with recognition. This is what happened next. Dr. Alana Mitchell had earned every letter that came before and after her name. At 42 years old, she was the Director of Economic Development for the city, a position that put her in rooms with mayors, state senators, and CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. She'd spent 2 decades climbing ladders that weren't built for women who looked like her, navigating boardrooms where she was often the only black face at the table, and turning skepticism into respect through sheer competence and unshakable grace. Her Tuesday mornings followed a sacred routine. Up at 5:30 a.m. for a run through her neighborhood, where she'd wave to the elderly couple who still didn't quite know what to make of her moving into their street 3 years ago. Shower, dress in one of her signature tailored suits, today a deep navy blue with subtle pinstripes that meant business, and a stop at her favorite coffee shop where Marcus, the barista, had her order ready before she reached the counter. "Double espresso, Dr. Mitchell. You conquering the world again today?" She'd smiled, tipped generously, and headed to First Union Bank on Merchant Street. It was a branch she'd been to dozens of times, though admittedly not this particular location. She needed to wire funds for a community development project, $75,000 that would go toward renovating a youth center in the East Side neighborhood. Grant money, public funds, everything above board and documented to the last penny. The bank's interior was all marble floors and vaulted ceilings, the kind of institutional architecture designed to make you feel small and the bank feel permanent. A handful of customers stood in the roped queue. Alana took her place behind an older white gentleman in a golf shirt who kept glancing at his watch and muttering about his tea time. When her turn came, she approached the counter with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere she walked. The teller was a woman in her late 20s, blonde hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Name tag reading, Brittany Henderson. "Good morning. I need to process a wire transfer." Alana slid her business card and driver's license across the counter, along with the transfer paperwork. Brittany picked up the ID with 2 fingers, as if it might be contaminated, and studied it with theatrical skepticism. Her eyes flicked between the photo and Alana's face multiple times, far more times than necessary. "This doesn't look like you," Brittany said flatly. Alana felt the familiar cold trickle down her spine, the one that came before these moments, the one that said, "Here we go again." "I'm sorry." Alana kept her voice measured, professional. "This ID. The photo doesn't look like you." Brittany set it down and crossed her arms. "I'm going to need you to step aside." "Excuse me?" Alana's professional mask cracked just slightly. "Step aside for what?" "While I call my manager, this transaction is flagged." Flagged. That word hung in the air like smoke. Within 90 seconds, a man appeared from the offices behind the teller windows. Jeffrey Pritchard, according to his nameplate. Mid-50s, graying at the temples, wearing the kind of vest and tie combination that signaled middle management who'd stopped climbing years ago. "What seems to be the problem, Brittany?" "This woman is trying to process a $75,000 wire with a suspicious ID." Brittany kept her voice low but not low enough. The word suspicious carried to the next teller window, to the customers in line, to the security guard by the door who suddenly became very interested in their corner of the bank. "It's not suspicious, it's mine," Alana said, fighting to keep her voice level. "My name is Dr. Alana Mitchell. I am a city official, and this wire is for a municipal project. Everything is documented." "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down." Jeffrey held up his hand in a gesture that was probably meant to be calming, but came across as condescending. "I am calm." Alana could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. "What I need is for you to process my transaction or explain specifically what issue you have with my identification." Jeffrey picked up the driver's license, squinted at it, then looked at Alana with the kind of exaggerated scrutiny a customs agent gives a passport they suspect is forged. "The photo doesn't match." "It absolutely does match. My hair is different. That's not grounds to refuse service." "It's grounds if I determine there's a discrepancy." Jeffrey set the ID down and crossed his arms, mirroring Brittany's defensive posture. "Additionally, a wire transfer of this size requires enhanced verification." "Fine, verify." Alana pulled out her phone. "I can have my office email confirmation. I can provide additional documentation. What specifically do you need?" "I need you to step away from the counter while we investigate." The word investigate dropped like a stone. Around them, the bank had gone subtly quiet. Other customers were definitely watching now. Phone cameras weren't out yet, but Alana could feel that shift in the air, that electricity that precedes viral moments in the social media age. "Investigate what, exactly?" Alana's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "Because I'm a black woman trying to conduct banking business? Because my hair is different in a photo? Or because you're making assumptions about what someone who moves $75,000 should look like?" "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice, or I'll have to ask security to..." "To what? Escort me out for banking while black?" Now Alana's voice did rise, just slightly, carried by the force of 2 decades of swallowed slights and smiled through microaggressions. "I have every right to be here. I have legitimate business, and you have yet to give me one valid reason why my transaction can't be processed." Jeffrey's face flushed red. "Your attitude is not helping your case." "My attitude?" Alana felt the word leave her mouth sharp as a blade. "I walked in here as a customer. You've treated me like a criminal from the moment I approached that counter. So yes, I have an attitude about that." Brittany had her hand on the phone under the counter. She knew that gesture. She'd seen it before. At a department store when she'd returned a purchase without a receipt. At a restaurant when she'd complained about incorrect change. That particular reach that said, "I'm calling someone." "I'm contacting our fraud department," Jeffrey announced, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The word fraud landed like an accusation, spreading through the room in whispers. Alana felt the familiar sensation of being displayed, on show. Every black professional's nightmare, being made into a spectacle in a space where white mediocrity moved freely, but black excellence required receipts, documentation, and even then faced suspicion. "You're making a mistake," Alana said quietly. "I don't think so." Jeffrey picked up her ID again, and then, in a gesture that would haunt him, tossed it across the counter toward her. Not placed, not handed back, tossed, like he was throwing scraps to a dog. The driver's license skidded across the marble counter, fell to the floor, and landed face up at Alana's feet. The bank went completely silent. Alana looked down at her own face staring up from the floor, at the ID that proved who she was, treated like garbage. When she looked back up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears she refused to let fall. "Pick it up," Jeffrey said. Around them, phones came out, the distinctive silent mode clicks of camera apps opening.
At least 4 people were now recording what was happening. The elderly white man from earlier with the golf tee time stood frozen, mouth slightly open. A young white woman with a baby in a carrier looked horrified. The black security guard near the door had his hand on his radio, his face carefully blank but his jaw tight with recognition of something he'd probably seen too many times before. Alana didn't pick up the ID. She stood absolutely still, every inch of her radiating controlled fury. No. Excuse me? Jeffrey's voice went up half an octave. I said no. You pick it up. You dropped it. You threw my identification, my legal identification, on the floor like it was trash. You pick it up. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I'm not going anywhere until you process my transaction or give me a legitimate reason why you're refusing service. Alana's voice carried now, clear and steady, trained by years of speaking in city council meetings and public forums. I am a customer of this bank. I have legitimate business, and you have treated me with nothing but disrespect and suspicion based on nothing except your own biases. I'm calling the police. The words landed like a bomb. Everyone in the bank knew what those words meant. Everyone had seen the videos of black people arrested for sitting in Starbucks, for checking out of Airbnbs, for having barbecues in parks. Everyone knew how those phone calls could end, with handcuffs at best, with violence at worst. Alana felt ice water flood her veins. She thought of Philando Castile, of Breonna Taylor, of every name that had become a hashtag, of every black professional humiliated in viral videos, of every moment when existing in public while black became a crime worthy of police intervention. You're calling the police, Alana repeated slowly, because I'm trying to conduct legal banking business? I'm calling the police because you're being disruptive and I've asked you to leave. I haven't raised my voice beyond asking for service I'm entitled to. I haven't threatened anyone. I haven't done anything except refuse to be treated like a criminal. Alana's hands were shaking now, but her voice stayed steady. But you go ahead. Call them. Jeffrey started dialing. And that's when Alana said the 4 words that changed everything. Call the board first. Jeffrey paused, phone halfway to his ear. What? Call the board. Alana's voice was ice cold now. I believe Ellen Richardson is the chair, and Marcus Chen is vice chair. You should probably let them know what's happening here before you involve law enforcement. Something in Jeffrey's face shifted. The color started to drain from his cheeks.
How do you know Jeffrey started, but Alana cut him off? How do I know who's on your board of directors? Alana's smile was sharp as broken glass. Because I've been in meetings with them, multiple meetings, about municipal partnerships and community reinvestment initiatives. Ellen and I had coffee last month to discuss your bank's obligations under the Community Reinvestment Act. Does that ring any bells for you, Mr. Pritchard? The blood had completely left Jeffrey's face now. Behind him, Brittany had gone pale as paper. I'm going to say this once more, Alana continued, her voice cutting through the absolute silence in the bank. My name is Dr. Alana Mitchell. I'm the Director of Economic Development for this city. The wire transfer I'm attempting to process is for a municipal project that your bank has already agreed to support as part of your CRA commitments. The ID you threw on the floor is legitimate. Everything I've told you is verifiable with one phone call to City Hall or to your own board chair, who knows exactly who I am. She took a breath, and in that breath was 2 decades of this, of being stopped by campus security at her own university because someone didn't believe she was a professor, of being followed in stores, of having white colleagues assume she was the assistant rather than the director, of smiling through it, rising above it, being twice as good to get half as far. Not today. What you've done here,
Alana said, and her voice carried to every corner of that marble-floored bank, is profile a customer based on race. You've thrown my legal identification on the ground. You've accused me of fraud with zero evidence. You've threatened to call the police on a city official conducting official business. And you've done all of this because you looked at a black woman and decided she couldn't possibly be who she says she is. Jeffrey's mouth opened and closed like a fish. We have protocols. Don't. Alana's voice snapped like a whip. Don't hide behind protocols. I've watched you process transactions for other customers. The white gentleman before me, you didn't study his ID like it was a forgery. You didn't question his transaction. You didn't throw his identification on the floor. The phones recording the scene had multiplied. At least 8 people were capturing every word. The black security guard had moved closer, positioning himself in a way that was protective of Alana, without being obvious about it. Now, Alana said, you have 2 choices. You can pick up my identification from where you threw it, apologize, and process my legitimate transaction. Or you can call the police, and when they arrive, you can explain to them and to the news cameras that will absolutely follow why you called law enforcement on a city official for the crime of banking while black. She took a breath and let that sink in. And then you can explain it to Ellen Richardson, and to your regional manager, and to whoever handles your CRA compliance, because I promise you, every municipal partnership this bank has with the city will be under review by tomorrow morning. Jeffrey looked like he might be sick. His hand holding the phone trembled visibly. But there's a third option, Alana said. Her voice softened just slightly, just enough to sound almost generous. You can call Ellen Richardson right now. Use the phone in your hand. Tell her exactly what happened here. Tell her that Dr. Mitchell from the city is in your branch, and there's been a misunderstanding about identification. Let's see what she says. The silence stretched so tight it could snap. Brittany spoke for the first time since the manager arrived, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Pritchard, I think we should— Shut up, Brittany. Jeffrey's professional mask had completely shattered. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the bank's aggressive air conditioning. Around them, customers had stopped even pretending to mind their own business. This was the moment that would define careers, that would become training videos about implicit bias, that would be discussed in corporate diversity seminars for years to come. One of the white women recording held up her phone higher, making sure she got Jeffrey's face clearly in frame. "This is going viral," she said, not to anyone in particular. "This is already going viral." Jeffrey looked at his phone, looked at Alana's ID on the floor, looked at the cameras, looked at the city official he'd just profiled, humiliated, and threatened. And very slowly, his professional life flashing before his eyes, Jeffrey Pritchard bent down and picked up Dr. Alana Mitchell's driver's license from the floor.
The first glass of wine hit the marble floor at 9:47 p.m. Sarah had been circling the room with a tray of champagne when a guest backed into her without looking. The collision was gentle, but 3 glasses tumbled, shattering in a crystalline explosion that momentarily stopped the conversation. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said immediately, already kneeling to collect the larger shards. Standard protocol. Apologize, clean quickly, disappear. "Oh, for God's sake!" Eleanor's voice cut through the resumed chatter. She was suddenly there, towering over Sarah in her Valentino gown, her face flushed with alcohol and something darker. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. The incompetence is unbelievable." Sarah kept her eyes down, gathering broken glass into a cloth napkin. "It was an accident, ma'am. I'll have this cleaned up in just—" "An accident?" Eleanor's laugh was ugly. "You people always have excuses. Do you have any idea how much those glasses cost? Baccarat crystal, $400 each." Sarah's hand paused for just a moment. "You people." The words hung in the air like smoke. I apologize, Sarah repeated, her voice carefully even. Premier Catering will of course cover any— Premier Catering charges me, you idiot, which means you just cost me $1,200. Eleanor swayed slightly, her martini sloshing. What's your name? Sarah stood slowly, the napkin full of glass shards cupped carefully in her hands. She could feel the room's attention now, guests trying to pretend they weren't watching, while absolutely watching. Sarah, ma'am. Sarah. Eleanor tested the name like it tasted bad. Well, Sarah, maybe if you spent less time standing around gossiping with the other help and more time actually doing your job, we wouldn't have these problems. Sarah's supervisor, Michael, a kind man in his 50s who'd worked every society event in New York for decades, appeared at her elbow. Miss Whitmore, I assure you this was completely accidental. Sarah is one of our most professional— I don't care about her resume. I care that she's ruining my party. Sarah remained still, her face a careful mask. She'd trained herself for these moments, the casual cruelty, the reflexive degradation. Usually it came in smaller doses, being ignored, having people snap fingers instead of using her name, the way some guests would simply put their empty glasses in her hand without breaking conversation, as if she were a mobile trash receptacle. This was different. This had an audience and a purpose. Eleanor needed someone to hurt. It's fine, Sarah said quietly. I'll get a broom and— You'll get nothing, Eleanor interrupted. You'll stand there and listen. Do you know who I am? Here it comes, Sarah thought, the inevitable question that always preceded the worst behavior. Yes, ma'am, you're Miss Whitmore. This is your home. This is my estate, Eleanor corrected, emboldened by the attention, by the alcohol, by the desperate need to feel powerful when everything in her life was spiraling. My family built this house in 1887. We've employed hundreds of people like you over the years, and the one thing we've always demanded is excellence, competence, basic intelligence. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed, but no one spoke up. Sarah's heart was pounding, but her face remained serene. She'd trained herself for these moments, the casual cruelty, the reflexive degradation. Usually it came in smaller doses, being ignored, having people snap fingers instead of using her name, the way some guests would simply put their empty glasses in her hand without breaking conversation, as if she were a mobile trash receptacle. This was different. This had an audience and a purpose. Eleanor needed someone to hurt. It's fine, Sarah said quietly. I'll get a broom and— You'll get nothing, Eleanor interrupted. You'll stand there and listen. Do you know who I am? Here it comes, Sarah thought, the inevitable question that always preceded the worst behavior. Yes, ma'am, you're Miss Whitmore. This is your home. This is my estate, Eleanor corrected, emboldened by the attention, by the alcohol, by the desperate need to feel powerful when everything in her life was spiraling. My family built this house in 1887. We've employed hundreds of people like you over the years, and the one thing we've always demanded is excellence, competence, basic intelligence. A few guests shifted